The alarm screamed at 6:30 a.m., and Sarah's body felt like it had been hit by a truck. 7 hours of sleep, exactly what every health article recommended, but her eyes burned with exhaustion, her shoulders already tight with the day's first wave of anxiety. She stared at the ceiling of her cramped Tokyo apartment, listening to the hum of traffic building outside her sealed windows. At 35, Sarah had tried everything. Keto, intermittent fasting, CrossFit at 5 a.m., sleep-tracking apps that chirped helpful reminders about her sleep debt. Her phone buzzed with notifications from wellness influencers promising transformation in 30 days. Yet here she was, 3 years into her Tokyo marketing job, heavier than she'd ever been, running on caffeine and willpower that felt increasingly brittle. She rolled out of bed and caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The puffiness around her eyes, the way her face looked somehow both tired and wired, this wasn't how 35 was supposed to feel. Back home in Seattle, her doctor had mentioned metabolic syndrome and elevated cortisol in that gentle but serious tone that made her stomach drop. The kitchen counter held the artifacts of her latest health attempt: protein powder, meal replacement bars, a fitness tracker that had been dead for 3 days. She grabbed a nutrition bar and her travel mug, already calculating how much caffeine she'd need to feel human. On the train to Shibuya, she found herself studying her fellow commuters. The businessman next to her, probably in his 50s, sat with his eyes closed, breathing slowly and deliberately. His face held a calm that seemed impossible for someone on a packed morning train. Across the aisle, an elderly woman opened a small cloth bag and began eating rice from a tiny ceramic bowl with wooden chopsticks, each bite deliberate and unhurried. Sarah pulled out her phone and scrolled through Instagram, double-tapping photos of acai bowls and gym selfies while mechanically chewing her processed bar. The taste was artificial vanilla and the texture of cardboard, but it was convenient. Efficiency over everything. That was the American way she'd brought to Tokyo. Her co-worker Kenji appeared at the office entrance, looking impossibly fresh despite living in the same sleepless city. He moved with an unhurried quality that Sarah envied, his energy steady rather than the caffeinated buzz she'd mistaken for vitality. "You look tired, Sarah-san. Long night?" "Just the usual. You know, trying to fit everything in." He tilted his head slightly. That expression she'd learned meant he was choosing his words carefully. "Everything. Work, gym, meal prep, catching up on emails, the usual productivity stuff." Kenji's grandmother had given him a small ceramic rice bowl when he moved to Tokyo for university 15 years ago. It sat in his kitchen cabinet, unremarkable except for the thin blue line painted around the rim. He used it for every meal: breakfast rice, evening soup, even ice cream on summer nights. The bowl held exactly 1 serving, no measuring required, and eating from it forced a certain pace. You couldn't rush with chopsticks and a small bowl. Sarah had seen him use it during their lunch breaks, the way he set it down between bites, the way he seemed to actually taste his food. She'd dismissed it as quaint, this attachment to a piece of ceramic. Sarah ate from whatever was convenient: plastic containers over the kitchen sink, paper plates while checking emails, protein bars unwrapped on her commute. Food was fuel, meals were productivity breaks, and eating was just another task to optimize. But watching Kenji now, she noticed something she'd missed before. He wasn't performing wellness or hustling for health. He simply moved through his day with a rhythm that seemed to honor some invisible boundary between effort and ease. The morning sun filtered through the office's floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across Sarah's desk. Her stomach growled despite the protein bar, and she realized she couldn't remember the taste of her breakfast 30 minutes after finishing it. Somewhere between the train and her computer screen, the food had simply disappeared, leaving her body confused about whether it had been fed. Kenji was preparing tea at the small kitchen station, measuring leaves into a ceramic pot with the same deliberate attention she'd seen him bring to everything. No productivity podcasts, no multitasking, just the simple act of making tea. Would you like some? Green tea helps with afternoon energy. Sarah almost declined. Tea seemed too slow, too simple for someone who needed serious caffeine intervention. But something about the ritual, the way steam rose from the pot like a small prayer, made her nod. The tea was nothing like the bitter, aggressive coffee she lived on. It was gentle, grassy, quietly energizing without the jolt and crash cycle she'd normalized. As she held the warm cup, she felt her shoulders drop slightly, her breathing slow. For the first time in months, Sarah wondered if the problem wasn't her lack of discipline. Maybe the problem was everything else. If you've ever felt tired even after a full night of sleep, or frustrated with diets that don't last, tell us in the comments which part of this story feels familiar, and stay with us for the next chapters. That evening, Sarah found herself standing in her apartment's tiny kitchen, staring at the chaos of half-used supplements and expired protein powders. The green tea had stayed with her all day, not as a caffeine high, but as a quiet energy that didn't crash. She thought about Kenji's small ceramic bowl, the way he ate lunch without scrolling his phone, without rushing to the next task. Her laptop glowed from the counter, displaying a half-finished presentation due tomorrow. The familiar script played in her head. Work late, grab convenience store curry, eat while reviewing emails, scroll social media until midnight, wonder why sleep felt so restless. Instead, she closed the laptop. The convenience store near her apartment had become a nightly ritual of defeat. Processed bentos eaten standing over the sink, the taste forgotten before the plastic container hit the trash. But tonight, she found herself in a different section, studying the traditional rice balls and small side dishes she'd always ignored. An elderly Japanese woman moved through the aisles beside her, selecting items with careful consideration. Small container of pickled vegetables, single-serving miso soup, a rice ball filled with grilled salmon. Everything she chose seemed designed for one person to eat mindfully, not to fuel someone rushing to the next obligation. Sarah copied her selections, feeling slightly ridiculous. When had she started eating like someone preparing for battle instead of someone nourishing a body? Back home, she arranged the small containers on her table instead of eating over the sink. The portions looked impossibly tiny compared to the giant bowls of pasta and oversized smoothies she'd been consuming. This couldn't possibly be enough food for someone her size, but as she ate slowly, the chopsticks forcing a certain pace, something unexpected happened. The flavors had space to register, the slight sourness of the pickles, the umami depth of the miso, the way the rice actually tasted like something when she wasn't wolfing it down while multitasking. 15 minutes later, she felt satisfied in a way that had nothing to do with being stuffed. Her stomach felt calm rather than distended, her energy stable rather than sluggish. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Melissa back in Seattle. "How's the Tokyo diet going? Found any magic Japanese secrets yet?" Sarah stared at the message, unsure how to explain that she'd discovered something that wasn't really a secret at all. Just small portions, eaten slowly, without distraction. It felt almost too simple to share. The next morning, she woke before her alarm for the first time in months. Not refreshed exactly, but not quite as demolished as usual. She noticed her sleep tracker showed the same 7 hours, but something about the quality felt different. Less tossing, fewer middle-of-the-night anxiety spirals. On the train, she observed more carefully. The businessman with his eyes closed wasn't sleeping, he was breathing. 3 counts in, 6 counts out, his chest rising and falling with metronomic precision. When he opened his eyes at his stop, they were clear and alert, not the glazed look she associated with morning commuters. She tried it. 3 counts in, 6 counts out. The breathing felt strange at first, too deliberate, but after a few minutes her heart rate settled. The train's chaos, the announcements, the crowd, the fluorescent lights, felt less overwhelming. Kenji noticed her drinking green tea instead of her usual massive coffee. "Are you feeling all right? Different morning routine?" "Just experimenting. I had dinner from the konbini last night, but not my usual junk. Those small containers, you know, and I ate it slowly." He smiled, not the patronizing expression she'd expected, but something warmer. "My grandmother always said that the stomach is the body's second heart. If you rush it, you confuse both." Sarah thought about her grandmother's small ceramic bowls, packed away in storage back home after the funeral. She'd kept the fancy china, but donated the everyday dishes, the ones worn smooth by decades of daily use. Now she wondered if she'd kept the wrong things. That afternoon, her energy crashed less dramatically than usual. No 3 p.m. desperation for sugar or caffeine, no afternoon brain fog that made her feel like she was thinking through mud. Her stomach felt light but not empty, satisfied but not sluggish. At the office, she watched colleagues hurry through lunch while scrolling phones, shoveling food while typing emails. She'd been doing the same thing for years, treating meals like necessary interruptions to productivity. But seeing it now, she realized how much energy the rushing actually consumed. When Kenji invited her to join him for lunch at a small restaurant nearby, she almost declined. She had work to finish. But something about the past 24 hours had shifted her curiosity about time and efficiency. The restaurant served traditional teshoku, a main dish with rice, miso soup, pickles, and small side dishes. Each component had its own small plate or bowl, creating a landscape of flavors and textures that demanded attention. You couldn't eat this meal while multitasking. The very design required presence. Sarah found herself eating more slowly than she had in years, not because she was forcing herself to, but because the meal's structure guided the pace. Small bites, varied flavors, natural pauses between dishes. 20 minutes later, she felt completely satisfied on what would have seemed like an impossibly small amount of food. "This would never fill me up back home," she admitted. "Maybe the problem isn't the amount," Kenji said gently. "Maybe it's the time." Walking back to the office, Sarah realized she felt energized rather than food-tired. Her usual post-lunch slump was nowhere to be found. Her mind felt clear, her body light but stable. That evening, she bought another small ceramic bowl from a kitchen store in Shibuya. Nothing fancy, just white porcelain with clean lines. Standing in her kitchen, measuring rice into the bowl, she felt slightly silly. This couldn't be the answer to years of failed diets and energy crashes. It was too simple, too quiet. But as she ate dinner from the small bowl, rice, grilled fish, pickled cucumber, she noticed how the portions felt adequate, how her hunger disappeared without the heavy fullness she'd confused with satisfaction for so long. 3 weeks into her small bowl experiment, Sarah's jeans fit differently. Not dramatically, she hadn't suddenly dropped sizes, but the bloating that had become her normal was gone. Her face looked less puffy in morning meetings, her energy more stable throughout the day. Her phone buzzed with another text from Melissa. "Girl, you've gone quiet on the food pics. No more Tokyo food adventures?" Sarah looked at her simple dinner. Rice, vegetables, miso soup arranged in small dishes on her table. How could she explain that the most transformative eating experience of her adult life looked like the most boring meal she'd ever photographed? The changes felt too subtle to share, too internal. She wasn't losing weight dramatically or posting gym selfies. She was just less exhausted, less bloated, less obsessed with food because meals had become satisfying instead of stressful. But others were noticing. "You seem different lately," her colleague Emma observed over coffee. "More calm or something? New meditation app?" "Not exactly, just eating differently." "Oh God, not another Japanese diet trend, right?" Emma laughed. "You're not going to start lecturing us about seaweed and fish eyes, are you?" Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. She'd been experiencing something quietly profound, the first sustainable relationship with food she'd had since college, and Emma was reducing it to another exotic fad. It's not really about the food being Japanese. It's about portions and pace and... Right. Very zen. Emma's attention had already drifted to her phone. Well, whatever you're doing, don't get too skinny. Some of us still want to eat real food. That weekend, Sarah's mother called from Seattle with her usual health interrogation. How are you eating over there? Are you getting enough protein? I read an article about those tiny Japanese portions. That's not sustainable for an American body, honey. Sarah tried to explain that she felt more satisfied eating smaller amounts slowly than she ever had eating large portions quickly. That her energy was more stable, her digestion calmer, her relationship with food less chaotic. But you're not actually losing weight, right? Because crash diets always backfire. Your metabolism will tank if you're not eating enough. The conversation left Sarah feeling defensive and confused. Was she depriving herself? The small ceramic bowl felt natural now, the portions adequate rather than restricting. But everyone around her seemed convinced that less food automatically meant suffering. At the office, she found herself hiding her lunch habits. When colleagues ordered massive bowls of ramen or giant rice bowls for delivery, she quietly ate her small bento, grateful that Japanese business culture made eating at your desk acceptable. Kenji noticed her self-consciousness. You're eating differently now, like someone from here. Is that weird? Am I appropriating something? He considered this seriously in his careful way. Food culture isn't about nationality. It's about relationship, with time, with hunger, with satisfaction. You're not copying Japan. You're learning to listen to your body. That afternoon, Sarah's energy remained steady through the post-lunch hours when she usually crashed. Her mind felt clear during the 3 p.m. meeting, when she typically struggled to focus. Small changes, but ones that accumulated throughout the day into something larger. Her sleep had shifted too. She still woke at 6:30, but the morning felt less violent. Her body seemed to surface from sleep naturally, rather than being jolted awake. The 2 a.m. anxiety spirals that had plagued her for months happened less frequently. She'd started leaving her phone in the kitchen at night, using an actual alarm clock instead of her sleep-tracking app. Without the blue light and constant notifications, her brain seemed to settle into evening more naturally. The changes felt sustainable in a way her previous health kicks never had. No extreme meal plans to abandon, no brutal workout schedules to skip. Just eating appropriate amounts of food at a reasonable pace, sleeping without screens, breathing deliberately on stressful train rides. But the social pushback continued. Emma brought her giant burrito bowls to lunch meetings, making pointed comments about actually enjoying food and not being scared of carbs. Melissa's texts grew more frequent, asking if Sarah was developing an eating disorder, if Tokyo stress was making her obsessive about control. The resistance confused her. She felt less obsessed with food than she had in years, not more. Meals had become simple rather than fraught. But in a culture that equated large portions with generosity and rapid eating with efficiency, her new habits looked like deprivation. During a video call with her doctor back in Seattle, she mentioned the changes hesitantly. So you're eating smaller portions and feeling more satisfied? Sleeping better without tracking devices? That actually sounds healthy, Sarah. Sometimes the simplest interventions are the most sustainable, but everyone thinks I'm being too restrictive, like I'm developing some kind of disorder. What does your body tell you? Sarah paused, realizing that for the first time in years, her body felt calm around food, not excited, not anxious, not obsessed, just calm. It feels normal, like I'm finally eating like a normal person instead of someone always preparing for famine or feast. Then trust that. Extreme in our culture often means anything that isn't excessive. That evening, Sarah sat at her small table with her ceramic bowl, eating rice and vegetables while rain patted against her windows. The meal took 20 minutes, longer than her old habit of wolfing down oversized portions, but shorter than the hours she used to spend obsessing about what to eat next. For the first time since moving to Tokyo, she felt like she was living in her body rather than managing it. Would you rather force yourself with willpower or redesign your environment and habits like this character is learning to do? Comment which path makes more sense to you, and share this episode with someone who needs a gentler approach to change. The business trip to Osaka arrived like a test Sarah hadn't studied for. 3 days of client dinners, hotel breakfast buffets, and the kind of schedule that turned meals into fuel stops between meetings. Everything that had felt natural and sustainable in her Tokyo routine suddenly seemed fragile. Her first morning at the hotel, she faced the breakfast buffet with her small ceramic bowl tucked into her travel bag. Around her, business travelers loaded plates with pastries, fried foods, and portions that would have fed her for the entire day. She felt ridiculous spooning a modest amount of rice and grilled fish into her bowl while others piled their trays high. The businessman next to her, American from his accent, glanced at her small serving with barely concealed judgment. "That's all you're eating. Better fuel up. These Osaka meetings are brutal." Sarah felt her cheeks warm. In the context of the buffet's abundance and everyone else's loaded plates, her portion looked almost pathetic. The old voice in her head started its familiar chant. "You're being too restrictive. You'll be hungry in an hour. You're making this too complicated." But as she ate slowly, tasting the clean flavor of rice, the subtle saltiness of the fish, her body felt satisfied rather than deprived. Around her, colleagues were already moving on to pastries and coffee while she was still enjoying her small meal. The first client dinner tested everything she'd learned, 8 people around a table laden with dishes, each course larger than the last. In Japanese business culture, refusing food could seem rude, but the portions were enormous compared to what she'd grown accustomed to. She tried to eat slowly, to pause between dishes, to listen for her body's signals of satisfaction. But the conversation moved quickly. The sake flowed, and she found herself falling back into old patterns, eating while distracted, matching the pace of others around the table. Afterward, walking back to the hotel, her stomach felt heavy and uncomfortable in a way she'd almost forgotten. Not just full, but genuinely distressed. Her energy felt sluggish rather than satisfied, her mind foggy rather than clear. Kenji texted that evening, "How's Osaka? Hope the meetings are going well." Sarah stared at her phone, unsure how to explain that she felt like she'd lost something important in just one day. The ease and lightness she'd been experiencing in Tokyo suddenly felt precious and precarious. The next morning she made a quiet decision. At the breakfast buffet, she again filled her small bowl with simple foods, ignoring the loaded plates around her. When colleagues commented, she simply said she preferred smaller breakfasts. When the lunch meeting included massive bento boxes, she ate half and left the rest, claiming she was still full from breakfast. By the 3rd day, something had shifted. Her energy remained more stable than her colleagues, her focus sharper during afternoon presentations. While others complained of food comas and reached for more coffee, she felt alert and present. On the bullet train back to Tokyo, she watched business travelers sleep fitfully or scroll phones with glazed exhaustion. She felt tired from the intensive meetings, but not depleted in the bone-deep way that used to follow business travel. Her phone buzzed with a message from Emma. "Saw your Osaka food pics. You're really sticking with this tiny portion thing, huh? Don't you miss actually enjoying food?" Sarah looked out the train window at the countryside rushing past. How could she explain that she was enjoying food more than she had in years? That eating had become pleasurable rather than stressful because she wasn't constantly overstuffed or obsessing about the next meal? Back in her Tokyo apartment that evening, she prepared a simple dinner, rice in her ceramic bowl, miso soup, pickled vegetables. The familiar rhythm of the meal felt like coming home to herself. The portions that had once seemed impossibly small now felt exactly right. She thought about the Osaka trip, how easy it would have been to abandon her new habits under social pressure and business demands. But maintaining them, even imperfectly, had felt like protecting something valuable rather than restricting herself. Her phone rang, her mother with her weekly check-in. "How was your business trip? Did you eat enough? I worry about you not getting proper nutrition over there." "I ate plenty, Mom. Actually, I felt more energetic than my colleagues by the end." "Really? But those tiny portions you've been describing?" Sarah realized her mother was genuinely confused by the idea that smaller amounts of food could lead to higher energy. In their family culture, food was love, abundance was care, and moderation looked like self-punishment. "It's not about eating less," she said slowly. "It's about eating differently, more slowly, more mindfully. I'm actually satisfied with less because I'm paying attention to what my body needs. I just don't want you developing one of those eating disorders, honey. All that measuring and controlling. It doesn't feel controlling. It feels freeing." After the call, Sarah sat with her bowl, thinking about the difference between control and awareness. Her old eating habits had been controlling, rigid diet rules followed by chaotic binges, constant mental negotiation about what she was allowed to eat, elaborate meal prep designed to prevent any spontaneous food decisions. This felt different, less mental effort, not more. The small bowl simply provided structure, like a gentle boundary that let her eat without overthinking. The slow pace allowed her to notice satisfaction, something she'd lost the ability to recognize. She pulled out her laptop and found herself Googling Japanese portion sizes and traditional eating habits. What she discovered surprised her. The small portions weren't about restriction. They were about variety and satisfaction. Traditional Japanese meals included many small dishes rather than one large plate, creating visual abundance while naturally limiting volume. The principle had a name: Hara Hachi Bu, eating until 80% full. Not restriction, but awareness of the point where hunger was satisfied, but the body wasn't overwhelmed. For the first time since starting this experiment, Sarah realized she'd stumbled onto something with roots deeper than her personal diet struggles. This wasn't about copying Japanese culture, but about returning to a more natural relationship with hunger and satisfaction that modern eating culture had obscured. The ceramic bowl sat empty on her table, catching the light from her apartment's small lamp. Such a simple object, but it had become the tool that taught her the difference between feeling full and feeling satisfied, between eating quickly and eating well. The revelation came not in a dramatic moment, but in the quiet of a Tuesday morning, 6 weeks after Sarah had first bought her ceramic bowl. She was preparing breakfast: rice, grilled fish, miso soup arranged in small dishes, when she realized she hadn't thought about food restriction or diet rules in days. Her phone buzzed with a notification from her old calorie tracking app, which she'd forgotten to delete. The bright interface promised to help her optimize macros and maximize results. Staring at it, she felt a strange disconnection, like seeing an advertisement for a life she'd never lived. When had she stopped counting? When had meals become about satisfaction rather than numbers? The answer surprised her. She'd never consciously stopped. She'd simply become absorbed in a different way of eating that made counting irrelevant. The ceramic bowl provided natural portion control. The slow eating pace allowed her to recognize fullness. The variety of small dishes created satisfaction without volume. What felt revolutionary wasn't the food, it was the absence of the mental combat that had dominated her relationship with eating for over a decade. At the office, Sarah found herself observing her colleagues with new eyes. Emma rushed through a massive salad while typing emails, complaining she was still hungry an hour later. Mark grabbed a protein bar between meetings, eating it without tasting while walking down the hallway. Lisa ate cookies during an afternoon presentation prep, then immediately felt guilty about it. They were all trapped in the same cycle Sarah had lived in for years, eating without presence, then either feeling unsatisfied or uncomfortably full, then mentally negotiating with themselves about what they were allowed to eat next. "You really do seem different," Kenji observed as they prepared tea in the office kitchen. "Not just the eating, something else." Sarah considered this. Her sleep had stabilized without tracking apps or sleep hygiene protocols. Her energy stayed steady throughout the day without caffeine manipulation. Her mind felt calmer without the constant background noise of food anxiety. "I think I stopped trying to control my body and started listening to it instead." "That's very Japanese," Kenji smiled. "The idea that health comes from harmony, not conquest." That evening, Sarah video-called her doctor for a 3-month follow-up. The conversation started with routine questions about sleep and energy, but shifted when Dr. Martinez noticed something in Sarah's affect. "You look different on camera, more relaxed. How are you feeling overall?" Sarah described the changes: the stable energy, better sleep, the sense of ease around food. She mentioned the ceramic bowl hesitantly, expecting skepticism about such a simple intervention. Portion control through environmental design rather than willpower, that's actually brilliant. And the slow eating naturally improves digestion and satiety signals. "How's your weight?" Sarah realized she hadn't weighed herself in weeks. Her old habit of daily scale check-ins had somehow faded without conscious decision. "I don't know exactly, but my clothes fit better. Especially around my middle. Less bloating, I think." "And your stress levels? Anxiety?" "Lower. Definitely lower. I think because I'm not fighting with myself about food all the time." Dr. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. "What you're describing sounds like nervous system regulation. When we're constantly in conflict with basic needs like hunger, the body stays in a state of chronic stress. Resolving that conflict, not through deprivation, but through attunement, allows the whole system to settle." After the call, Sarah sat with this insight. Her old approach to health had been adversarial: body versus mind, discipline versus desire, good foods versus bad foods. Everything framed as a battle to be won through superior willpower. But willpower was exhausting. The constant mental effort of overriding her body's signals, calculating portions, forcing herself through workouts she hated, it had kept her nervous system in a state of perpetual stress that made sustainable health impossible. The ceramic bowl had been a bridge to something different, not giving up control, but relocating it from internal conflict to external structure. Instead of fighting her hunger, she'd designed an environment that naturally supported appropriate portions and mindful eating. Her phone rang. Melissa calling from Seattle with her usual dietary interrogation. "Okay, I've been patient, but I need details. What exactly is this Japanese food thing? Are you doing some kind of elimination diet, intermittent fasting? You're being so secretive." "I'm just eating normal amounts of food normally." "What does that mean? Normal for who? Normal how?" Sarah struggled to explain. How could she describe that the revolutionary change was the absence of revolution, that the most radical thing she'd done was stop doing radical things? "I use a small bowl instead of a large plate. I eat slowly instead of quickly. I pay attention to my food instead of multitasking." "That's it." "That's it?" Mel's voice carried disappointment and skepticism. "So you're basically just eating less." "I'm eating differently. And yes, probably less volume, but I'm not hungry. I'm actually more satisfied than when I was eating larger portions." "This sounds like an eating disorder, babe. All this focus on portion control and mindful eating, that's what people say when they're restricting." The accusation stung because Sarah had wondered the same thing. Was this just restriction disguised as mindfulness? But her body told a different story. Her energy was higher, not lower. Her mood was more stable, not more anxious. Her relationship with food felt peaceful, not stressful. "Restriction feels like fighting with yourself," she said slowly. This feels like being on the same side as myself. After the call, Sarah sat at her table with her evening meal. Rice, vegetables, clear soup arranged in small dishes. The portions looked modest, but felt complete. Her hunger was satisfied without the heaviness that used to signal fullness. She thought about Melissa's confusion, Emma's jokes, her mother's concern. They all came from the same place, a culture that had normalized overeating to the point where appropriate portions looked like deprivation. The ceramic bowl sat empty, reflecting the soft light from her apartment lamp. Such a small thing to carry such weight. Not the weight of restriction, but the weight of permission. Permission to eat enough rather than too much, to feel satisfied rather than stuffed, to trust her body rather than override it. For the first time in years, Sarah felt like she was living in partnership with her body rather than at war with it. 1 year later, Sarah stood in her Seattle kitchen, unpacking boxes after her transfer back to the company's headquarters. Her hands found the ceramic bowl, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, and she smiled at how much weight such a small object carried. Not physical weight, but the weight of everything it represented. Her mother arrived with groceries and takeout containers, the familiar abundance that had once felt like love, but now seemed overwhelming. "I got your favorites from that place near Pike Market. And there's ice cream in the freezer. You're probably starving after eating those tiny Japanese portions for so long." Sarah looked at the enormous containers of pasta and oversized muffins. Food that would have excited her 2 years ago now felt aggressive in its portions, exhausting in its excess. "Actually, I think I'll make some rice. I'm still full from lunch." Her mother's face showed the confusion Sarah had grown accustomed to, the inability to understand how someone could feel satisfied with less food rather than deprived. That evening, preparing dinner in her new kitchen, Sarah realized how naturally the habits had integrated. The small bowl, the slow eating, the attention to hunger and satisfaction. None of it required willpower anymore. It had become simply how she ate, like preferring coffee over tea or walking instead of driving. Her phone buzzed with a text from Kenji in Tokyo. "How's the readjustment? Don't let America supersized everything convince you to abandon your bowl." She photographed her dinner, rice, salmon, steamed vegetables arranged in small dishes, and sent it back. Some things are worth protecting. The next morning, her old friend Emma visited with coffee and pastries from their favorite bakery. The pastries were enormous, stuffed with cream and sugar, designed for sharing but typically consumed by one person. God, I missed having someone to eat with properly. You were getting so weird about portions in Tokyo. Sarah accepted half a pastry and ate it slowly, paying attention to the sweetness, the richness, the way her hunger shifted from satisfied to slightly overfull after just a few bites. She left the rest on her plate. "That's all you want? These used to be your favorite. I still like them. I just don't need as much as I used to. You've gotten so disciplined. It's kind of intense." Sarah considered this. From the outside, her eating habits probably did look disciplined. The small portions, the slow pace, the apparent restraint. But from the inside, they felt like the opposite of discipline. They felt like finally being able to relax around food. 2 months into her Seattle readjustment, Sarah had her annual physical. Dr. Martinez reviewed her lab work with obvious pleasure. "Your inflammatory markers are down significantly. Blood sugar stable. Blood pressure excellent. Whatever you've been doing, keep doing it." "I've been eating from a small bowl," Sarah said, feeling slightly ridiculous. "And that's it. Small bowl, slow eating, paying attention to hunger. Nothing dramatic." Dr. Martinez leaned back in her chair. "Sarah, in 15 years of practice, I've seen every diet trend, every supplement protocol, every fitness program patients swear will change their lives. Most last a few months before people burn out and return to baseline. You've maintained changes for over a year without feeling deprived or fighting with yourself. That's the definition of sustainable health behavior. But it seems too simple, like it shouldn't work. The most effective interventions often are simple. Complex usually means unsustainable. That evening, Sarah prepared dinner in her small ceramic bowl, the same one that had traveled from Tokyo to Seattle, from experimental tool to everyday companion. As she ate slowly, tasting her food, paying attention to the signals of satisfaction, she reflected on what had really changed. It wasn't just the portions or the pace, it was the relationship with her body, with hunger, with the very concept of self-care. She'd stopped trying to impose her will on her biology and started creating conditions where her biology could function naturally. Her phone rang, Melissa with her weekly check-in. "You're still doing the Japanese bowl thing? It's been a year, babe. When do you get to eat normal again? This is normal for me now. Don't you miss pizza, burgers, real food?" Sarah thought about this. She still ate pizza occasionally, still enjoyed burgers and ice cream. But her relationship to those foods had shifted. They'd become occasional pleasures rather than regular fuel sources, treats rather than staples. "I eat all the same foods. I just eat them differently." It sounds exhausting, all that mindfulness and portion control. Actually, it's the least exhausting way I've ever eaten. No counting, no guilt, no feeling out of control, just eating when I'm hungry, stopping when I'm satisfied. After the call, Sarah washed her ceramic bowl and set it in the dish rack to dry. Tomorrow she'd eat from it again, and the day after that, and probably for years to come. Not because she had to, but because it had become the container for a way of living that honored both her hunger and her satisfaction. The bowl reflected the kitchen light, simple and unchanged despite everything it had taught her. Sometimes the most profound transformations came not from dramatic overhauls, but from small, consistent choices repeated until they became identity. Sarah turned off the lights and headed to bed, her body calm and satisfied, her mind quiet. In a culture obsessed with more food, more intensity, more dramatic results, she'd discovered the radical power of enough. If this story reminded you that real transformation comes from small habits repeated over time, not from overnight fixes, subscribe to the channel, tell us which country you watch from, and invite someone to start this journey with you in the next story.